Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at JonnyLipshamStudios.co.uk. I hope everybody is doing well and has had a great week. Hang on, let me just turn my volume coming out of my speakers down. I can hear myself coming out of the speakers. That's not so good. So, welcome, everybody. I hope everyone's had a great week so far. And all of that fun stuff. We've only got like 7 people here, but hopefully we'll fill up in a minute or two. So we'll wait for people to roll in. I know there's a few people who are not going to be able to be here tonight, like Chris Manrakna and Just Bob. So hello to you guys. I hope you are doing well, and I hope you have a great evening with whatever it is you are doing instead of being here. I hope you have a good one. Just Bob is working, so I hope your work shift goes well, Bob, and that it's not too stressful or difficult. But yeah, shame you can't be here because it's always a good show when you're here. So let's see who the lucky 7 are. Who is now the lucky 8, because we've had a couple of people just walk in the door. So we got Billy Morgan, who is first in the door by about 4 hours. Well done, Billy. Followed by Chris Manrakna, the aforementioned, who can't attend tonight, but he says he'll catch it on the replay. So, Chris, if you're watching the replay, hello, good to see you. Hope you're doing well, mate. And thank you for all of your support. I appreciate it a lot. And we got Ron Figura here, who says he's got to use Edge again to get in on the chat. WTF? Yeah, I don't know what the story is with that, Ron. The error message that you've got coming up about copyright, I don't think that's to do with my channel. I'd be very surprised if it is, because I have no copyright warnings whatsoever. So I don't know what that's all about. That might be something to do with the channel that you are using. I don't know. You may have to raise that with Google support and see if they can work that one out for you. Daryl Henderson is also here as well. Mike Johnson over in the Philippines is crazy enough to still be up at this time of the morning, which is awesome because it'll be round about his breakfast time, I think. And Rich Cresswell, who is just down the road in England, is here as well. We got Simon Carpenter, we got Don Oliver here, we got Dave Barcelo, and we've got Wayne552, who has just made it in the door. Welcome, everybody. So we got like 10 people here, which is great. Thanks very much, everybody, for coming. So in case you're new, and I don't think anybody else who is watching is new, but for those of you that are watching on replay, or you've just stumbled across this, this is my Wednesday live show that I do. It's called Songwriting Simplified. And basically, this started way back in 2017 with my good friend Jonny Gibe, originally starting out as a podcast. And we fairly quickly abandoned the idea of having it as a podcast and decided to make it a YouTube live show instead, because we thought that that might be a little bit more interactive and that people might ask questions that they might have about songwriting and stuff. And we could take questions live rather than waiting for questions to come in via email and then read out emailed questions, which is fine. We can do that as well. I take emailed questions. So if you've got a longer form question, you can certainly email me. If you see the web address at the bottom there, at the bottom of the screen, JonnyLipshamStudios.co.uk. If you go down, it's not a link or anything, so you can't click on it. But if you type that into your browser, you don't need the W's, just type in JonnyLipshamStudios.co.uk, and that'll take you to my website. And on my website, there is a contact us form. You can fill that out, and if you title or put the subject line as Songwriting Simplified Show question, and then in the body of your text, ask your question, whatever it might be, because it's an email. There's no limit on characters, like there is in the chat. I'm aware that there is a limit on characters, especially if you take away some of those characters to type at Jonny Lipsham Studios. It does take away from your character limit. So if you've got a longer form question, there's 2 ways you can do it. One, you can email it to me. That's fine. The second way is you can take up a couple of posts in chat. That's fine. If you need to do that, if you need to do a continuation, that's also fine. So we got the Massachusetts meetup for Studio One meetup. Not that long after this, I think. I don't think it's immediately after this. No, it's an hour after this. So that would be like 2 a.m. for crazy people in the UK, 3 a.m. for even crazier people in Europe. But it's like 8 p.m. Central Time, I believe. Thank you, Billy. Yes, 8 p.m. Central for that meetup. And those are great, by the way. The Studio One meetups are awesome. So this show started out as a live stream that I did with Jonny Gibe, and I basically came into his channel via Skype. And it was great, even though early on I had really, really shitty internet, but certainly now the last several years I've had really, really great internet. So that's not really a problem anymore. However, Jonny, his life got complicated and got busy, and I basically had to take over the show full time, unfortunately. So I do it on my own now. Which I don't mind. I do have guests that come on occasionally, like I've had Rich Cresswell. I've got Joe Gilder lined up in a couple of weeks' time, who's going to come on and be a guest on the show, and we will get to hear his story, how he got into songwriting, and his approach to songwriting, because his is actually quite a bit different than mine. So it'd be great for us to kind of compare notes on how we go about writing songs, and hopefully that'll be beneficial to you guys. And of course, Joe is just a great guy. So we've got him lined up as a guest as well. And I'm hoping to also be able to get Mike from Studio One Revealed on the show as well, probably on a Sunday night live rather than on Songwriting Simplified. So as you can hear, I still have my cold. However, it is much improved since Sunday. I'm definitely feeling a wee bit better. So much improved. So tonight, I'm not saying that we have any questions in chat yet. It would be nice if we have some questions, but we don't have any yet, and we don't have any emailed either. So, but that's fine. We can handle that. There are plenty of things that I can talk to you guys about. So I think the last couple of weeks we talked about chord changes and how you can basically add a little 2-5-1 in the midst of in between chords that you've got in a set of chord changes to kind of make things make your chord changes a little bit more interesting and a little bit more sophisticated without actually doing anything crazy harmonically. So I'm not talking about jazz harmony here. I'm talking about just regular, triadic or, 4-part harmony. So, fairly simple harmony that you can extend with things like, ninths, 11ths, 13s, sharp 11s, alterations to those extensions if you want. And you can also make use of tritonal substitutions as well, because those always help bring some extra color and some extra spice to your music. Regardless of the genre, jazz chords, jazz harmony, they work in pretty much every style of music. You can use those kind of chords in country music. You can use it in funk. You can use it in hip hop. And of course you can use that kind of thing in R&B. It's that kind of harmony. Although it has its roots very much in jazz, it's kind of pretty much universal now. And in fact, jazz harmony has its roots in European classical music from like the 1900s. So, and people like Debussy and Ravel and Tchaikovsky and Shostakovich, the harmonic language of those kind of people kind of got brought into jazz. So, I'm not going to talk about jazz harmony. You'll be glad to know. I know that there are some of you that are really into that and some of you that are really just not into that, and you're not ready for that. So I'm going to review a little bit of what we did last week and then kind of extend the concept a little bit further for you. So let's go back a little bit and review kind of how this works. When I talk about doing 2-5-1s, how that kind of works and then how we take 2-5-1s and basically drop them in between chord 1 and, one particular chord and another particular chord. And what this does, the effect that this has, is it has the effect of making your chord changes more interesting and more lively. So here we go. Let's try this out. So we're going to be in C major because C major is easy. And you can transpose this and do this in all 12 major keys and all 12 minor keys. Okay? So let's take the classic 1-6-2-5-1, which is chord C major, which is chord 1, A minor, D minor, and G7. Okay, it's nice, simple, straightforward, easy, nothing complicated there. So, what do I mean by putting in a 2-5-1? Okay, so our first chord is C, and our next chord is A minor. So what we want to do is we want to do a 2-5-1 in A minor. So first thing we need to do is work out what chord 2 is in A minor. So there's A minor, or A. We need to do chord 2, which is going to be B half diminished, and then E7, which is chord 5. And that takes you to A minor. So you can do... And then we need to do the same for chord 2 for D minor. So E minor, A7, D minor. And then we could do the same for chord 5 as well. And then that brings us back to chord 1. Jonah is in the house. Hello, Jonah. Good to see you, buddy. Welcome to the show. I hope you enjoy this one. So let's go through those chord changes. So we got chord 1, 2-5-1 in A minor, 2-5-1 in D minor, 2-5-1 in G, which I'm doing a G sus because I want to get back to C. And then we're ending back on chord 1 for C major. So that's a nice kind of way to expand out a set of chord changes. If, like, you've got a set of chord changes, but you're realizing that those chord changes are a little bit on the short side for a verse. They maybe sound good for the chorus. So you could basically do... You could do that for your chorus, maybe. But for your verse, you stretch this out. All right, so that would work quite nicely to, kind of have the shortened version for a chorus and then the longer version with the extra 2-5-1s in for a verse. Now, what can we do to kind of make this even more interesting? Well, we can do a tritonal substitution or two. So what do I mean by a tritonal substitution? For those of you that aren't aware of what these are, I talk about these a lot, so most of you will kind of know how they work by now. So basically, a tritonal substitution is a chord that has two notes in common. So that's what a substitution chord is. It's a chord that has two notes in common with the chord it's going to replace. Kind of like in a soccer game, if you have a centre forward who is on the pitch and he's been on the pitch for, maybe 2/3 of the game, and you want to get a fresh person in there to take over his position who, has not been on the field for the whole game, so they are fresh to maybe take an attack on the opposition to score a goal and try and take the lead. Maybe you're 2 goals down or something, and you want fresh attacking forwards and centre forwards to really go after the opposition. So that's what a substitute is. So you would basically have a guy who is a centre forward or a forward sat on the bench, and you would say, okay, you're going to go on and you're going to replace this other guy who is also a centre forward. So they have to have key skills in common in order to be able to do a good replacement. And so that's what we need here with chords. So let's take a C7 chord. And let's strip away the root. And let's strip away the fifth. So now we're left with just these two notes. These two notes, the B flat and the E, are a tritone apart. So what we want to do is we want to find a chord that is not a C chord that has these two notes in common. It just so happens that the chord of G flat or F sharp has those two same tones in it. So if I count up 3 whole tones, 1, 2, 3, now I have an F sharp or a G flat 7 chord. And it will do the same job, because what does chord 1 go to? Chord 1 might go to chord 4 in this case. Okay, so what is this chord going to do? It's going to substitute for this C7. So I'm basically going to do this. Whoops. Hey, come on, Lipsham. Does exactly the same job. Okay, so that's what a tritonal substitution is. So how can we fit this around this little 2-5-1 thing that I've talked about? So let's say we're doing the first 2-5-1 in A minor. So C major, B half diminished, E7, A. You can do that and it sounds great, but how about something that sounds a little smoother? So we can replace the 5, which is E7, for B flat 7, because it's 3 tones away. Okay. And it has those 2 notes in common. There's E7, there's B flat 7. It has the same notes in common, okay? And it's going to resolve down nicely. Still does the same job. So let's go C. And it works beautifully. And then we can carry on. Now, that doesn't sound great because I'm kind of overdoing a bit. I'm doing a tritonal substitution on every chord 5. Now, in some circumstances that will work. In most cases, that just sounds a little bit like it's too much. But here's where it can really work. I want to get from a distant key, from C to a distant key like G flat. So C, B half diminished, B flat 7, A minor, A flat minor, G7 to G flat major. So if I want to make that transition sound nice and smooth, if I take away the that, it wouldn't sound quite so smooth. I mean, it sounds okay if I do A flat minor, D flat 7, G flat. Kind of sounds fine because that is a 2-5-1. But if I go, that's even smoother. So. And now I'm in the key of G flat. And they're not related. So, but if you need to go from one key to another that's not related, that's probably a smart way to do it. All right, so we do actually have some questions now. So let's see. Rich Cresswell says, for viewers and people rewatching, what are some useful theory books for those that like to read, such as publishers? Okay. There are a couple of really good books. In fact, there's loads. There's absolutely loads. And I actually need to put this up on my website, actually. So I'm going to do that. I'm actually going to publish a reading list for music theory, which is going to go up on johnnylipshamstudios.co.uk. Because I think it's important that I give you a comprehensive list. There are a couple that I can think of off the top of my head. They're maybe not necessarily quite so basic, but certainly they had a lot of influence upon me. One is a book called The Lydian Chromatic Concept, which is an advanced harmony book. And it talks about modes in particular. Modes of the major scale, modes of the minor scale. And personally for me, it opened up a lot for me because I was very much locked into major chords, minor chords, major keys, minor keys. Hadn't really thought that much about modes. And so that book really opened up a lot to me about modes and interlinking different keys in the circle of fifths. If you've ever seen the diagram of the circle of fifths, you can see how you can draw a line between one key center and another, and you can draw all of these relationships until they're all interlinked. And then with that, you can then work out how to get from one to another via, things like 2-5-1s or via, pivot chords like, a tritonal substitution for chord 5, stuff like that. That for me was a really, really brilliant book. And it was something I read over and over again when I was at university because it was kind of required reading at university. But that's kind of if you want to pursue kind of like the more advanced kind of stuff like tritonal substitution, and you want to get a good handle on being able to smoothly move from one key center to another without your listeners ever really being aware that you've changed key. And certainly tritonal substitution is a really, really smart way to be able to get there. So that was one really, really good book that I got a lot out of. There are some really great Hal Leonard books on music theory as well, that will actually take you from kind of very bare bones basic, kind of what is a tone, what is a key center, what is a scale, how do you define a major scale, how do you define a minor scale, and there are a couple of different types of minor scale. There's a harmonic minor and a melodic minor scale. So how do you kind of define those, and what role do those serve, and how do those fit in, and all of that? So there are some books like that. And like I said, I'm going to put up on my website a reading list. I'm going to draw it up, and I will get Louis to post it up on the website and put a link to it there so that you can go and get it, and you can download it as a PDF. That's kind of what I'm going to do. So I will get that done in the next week or so. and I'll get it done as a PDF, and I'll get Louis to post a link to it on the website so you can just go and download it. And then there are going to be for each book there will be a link to where you can get it if it's available. Some of the books that will be on the list are not necessarily available, and you may have to do a little bit of Googling to try and find them. Like you might find them in Google Books, for example, but because some of them are just they're not in print anymore. But yes, I will make that available in the next week or so. He also asks, what are some neat practices for improving both accuracy and fluidity? Are you talking about piano playing, or are you talking about moving from one chord to another? If you're talking about moving from one chord to another, there's one key and one key only, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, other people will have their own interpretation of this, but for me, the one key is voice leading. So what do I mean by voice leading? If you imagine that your chords that you play on your guitar or on your keyboard, and each individual note that makes up that chord were a choir, then that's what I mean by voice leading. If you imagine each note of the chord to be a voice, alto, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and think of it that way, then the best way to make harmony move nice and smoothly is by stepwise motion as much as possible, and avoid awkward leaps, like leaps of a tritone, leaps of a major seventh, things like that, which are a little bit on the awkward side. They're not impossible. You can sing them. They're just a little bit awkward to pitch. So you want to kind of stick with either stepwise or, simple motion, like an interval of a third, an interval of a minor third, or, a fourth or a fifth or something like that, or even a sixth. That's, all of those are kind of relatively easy to pitch for most singers. So I know I'm kind of talking about singing and choirs and stuff, and you're probably thinking, well, I'm a guitar player or I'm a piano player. That doesn't apply to me. The technique does. Because the best way you can make your chords move smoothly between one and the next is by having the notes of each chord move to the nearest available next note. And this is where two things come into play: voice leading and inversions of the chords. And I've kind of talked a little bit about inversions before, but we can kind of bring this in a little bit more as well. So let's go back to the keyboard. And we will take what we call a root position C major chord. Now, we call it root position because the root of the chord, the note that gives the chord its name, is at the bottom. Okay? So if you're working with three note chords, then there are only three inversions that you can have: root, first, and second. Now, how did I arrive at those? I arrived at those in a really simple way. You take the lowest note off and you put it up an octave. Okay? So take that lowest note off, put it on the top. So now we have the root at the top, and we have the third underneath and the fifth in the middle. Okay? That's the first inversion. Second inversion, do the same again. Move the bottom note, put it up on top. So now the third is on the top, the root is in the middle, and the fifth is at the bottom. So if you're working with gospel harmony, this is actually a really good inversion. Okay? So the more notes you have, the more inversions you have. So let's take a major seventh. So now we've got four voices. So we've got four inversions. We got root, first inversion, second inversion, third inversion. Now, I think I said last week, John Williams likes these third inversion major sevenths. Those are his favorite. Why? Because you got the root and the major seventh right next to each other, which provides a nice bit of tension and a nice bit of spice. Okay, provides that nice kind of, kind of bite to them because there is that tension there. So, so what's the secret here? The secret here is two things: voice leading and inversions. So let's say we take this root position C major chord and we want to go to an F major chord. What are the nearest available notes? The nearest available notes. Well, the C is going to stay the same because it's common to both chords. But if I move the top note up one to the A and the middle note, the E, up one semitone, now we've got a second inversion F major chord. Now what's cool here is that's a nice smooth transition because those top two voices are moving stepwise. And that sounds really good. And it's easy for somebody to sing if you're doing backing vocal harmonies. But if you're not doing backing vocal harmonies and you're just playing it on the piano, it's just easy to play. Okay? But if you're doing backing vocal harmonies and this is how you're working them out, and maybe you're kind of new to backing vocal harmonies, this is the way to do it. Find the smoothest movement between each chord with the voices moving naturally. So that's a pretty simple one. So let's say you want to go chord 1 to chord 4, back to chord 1, and then to chord 5. What's the nearest chord 5? Well, there's a G. That's common to a C major chord and a G major chord. We can move those bottom two notes down one as well. And now we've got a first inversion G major chord. So we're doing this. And it's nice and smooth. Easy to play on the keyboard, easy for backing vocalists to sing. Because in some cases, the top note stays the same. So, you've got... And then the middle note is doing this, which is actually quite melodic. And then the bottom note is doing this. So it's nice stepwise motion for each of the voices. Okay? Now, there's a Steely Dan song called Hey 19 that actually features this really, really nicely with the backing vocals in the section towards the end of the song where they're singing about the Cuervo Gold, the fine Colombian, Mate Tonight, oh wonderful thing. So how does that go? Well, that song is in the key of D major. And that's basically how the chord changes go. So how do the backing vocals go? See how all of those notes move in a nice, simple fashion. It's not hard. Now, the only difficult part in that backing vocal section is the leap from here. Down to a D major root position, and then you have to leap up an octave. Now, pretty much everybody can sing an octave. So it's not so bad. An octave leap is okay. It's not the smoothest voice leading. So let's take that apart a little bit. So what do we got? We're starting on a second inversion D major chord, going to a first inversion G. All of that is next door notes, with the middle note staying the same. And then we've got this chord here. This is an A7 chord without the root because the bass player is playing the root. And then from there, that seventh now drops down to the third, and we get a first inversion D major chord, and then the root position D major chord down at the bottom. And then we go up the octave, and then back to that second inversion. So there is in that really sophisticated, cool sounding backing vocal part, all three inversions of a D major chord being used. So you have this one, you have this one, and you have this one, and then the same one up the octave. But it's all the same chord. It's all the D major chord. And that's why it works so well. It's simple, but when you hear it sung by the three vocalists, it sounds sophisticated. And especially when you kind of combine that with the bass going. And so it kind of it makes something that is actually really simple and very pop orientated sound a little bit sophisticated. And then you've got the keyboard part, which is very cool. And it's perfect. It's sophisticated, and yet it's simple. It's just a D with a little sharp 9 thing going on here, which gets played up at the top here. And then this little figure here, which is just a shell of A. Basically, it's just the third and the root. And then you have this, F over G to G over A. And it's very sophisticated sounding. And then you've got the backing vocals. So the secret with this is smooth voice leading for each of the voices in the chords. And then making use of inversions of those chords to make it nice and smooth. And so there's no leaping around going on. But that is a terrific question. And by the way, I recommend just to listen to a song that is beautifully written, because it's simple and yet it's really sophisticated sounding. It's off the which record is it off? It's off the Asia record. So go check it out. Steely Dan, Hey 19. There's a few live performances that they've done, and they've kind of reharmonized it a bit, made it even more sophisticated for the 21st century than its original 1977 counterpart. But it sounds great because, you know, the under the hood is still that simple yet sophisticated harmony that's going on. And then you've got lots of nice, you know, muted picking guitar going on the record as well, on the left and the right, and you've got little kind of snippets of cool little noodles and doodles that Larry Carlton is doing in a kind of more lead guitar fashion. It's a great song. It's a great record. And I highly recommend it, because of all of the songs on the Asia record, I think Hey 19 is probably the simplest. You know, there's Josie, which I've kind of unpacked some of the harmony with that song before, where there's lots of what Walter and Donald called mu major chords, which is basically it's like a major 9 without the third kind of sound. You know, this kind of sound. That kind of sound you hear in Josie. And again, it's quite simple. It's triads with a different bass note. So, you know, to kind of underpin this idea of accuracy and fluidity, get those inversions under your fingers. Now, if you're not a keyboard player and you're a guitar player, you need to still get those inversions under your fingers. It's going to be a little bit easier for you guitar players. Why? Because that's the way the guitar is built. The guitar is built around inversions anyway, and you just don't really think of them as inversions. You think of them as different shapes for the same chord. So get those different shapes for chords under your fingers. Find as many as you possibly can for, you know, major sevenths, minor sevenths, dominant sevenths, half diminished sevenths, full diminished sevenths. Get those all under your fingers, and then start, you know, kind of working out ways in which you can kind of add extensions to those chords. Remember, when you're a guitar player, you're working with a bass player, you don't need to play the bass note. You just don't. It's not necessary. And that frees up, you know, extra fingers for doing some additional, from adding some additional notes, like some nines, some sharp 11s and 13s and things like that on the guitar. So all of those kind of extended chords are perfectly possible on the guitar. It's just a case of remembering that you can actually strip out some of the harmony and that you don't need. Things like the fifth of the chord. You don't really need the fifth of the chord quite so much. Basically, the two most important notes are the seventh, either major or flatted, and the third, which is going to be either major or minor. Those are the two most important tones. And then you can add everything else to that and still make it sound like a chord. So, for example, if I play a C major 7, there's a C major 7. Now, I'm playing the John Williams third inversion there. But if I take that root away, it now sounds like a minor chord. But if I just play the bass note for you, now it sounds like C major, even though I'm effectively playing an E minor triad on the top. And this is how you start thinking about making your simple triads sound sophisticated. And this is where you can do things like take a second inversion F major triad and put a B flat underneath it. And now you've got a B flat major 9 chord without the third. And you've done nothing sophisticated. You've just played a triad and put another bass note underneath it. You can experiment with these kind of ideas. So, you know, let's take an A major triad. Let's put an E flat underneath that. What have we got here? Well, effectively, we've now got, if we're using E flat as the root here, we've got E flat, we've got a sharp 11 there, we've got a 7th, and we've got a flat 9, and there's no third. But it's very loaded with tension, and it's going to resolve down to a D major chord, or a D minor chord. And by the way, those kind of chords, you'd think, hey, all that sophisticated harmony, surely that's all like a 20th and 21st century thing. No, you would be wrong. Johann Sebastian Bach made use of that exact chord I just played, except he would resolve it upwards to E minor. So he would basically go from like that. He would go D major or D minor, and then A with E flat in the bass to E minor. So all of that's kind of Bachian harmony. It's just nobody's ever really realized that actually he had a really sophisticated harmonic palette. So get those inversions under your fingers, into your brain, and you will find that not only once you've got those inversions under your fingers as a piano player or as a guitar player, not only will you find that you can move much more easily from one chord to another, but now a whole new world opens up for you, because now you can start writing really good backing vocal parts. And you can start writing horn section parts, because you're going to do exactly the same thing. Try and keep things to stepwise motion as much as you can. It's the exact same thing. And then for strings, writing for, a string quartet, same kind of idea. Nice, smooth movements, because you don't want the violins to have to make awkward leaps, because an awkward leap might involve an awkward fingering or an awkward bowing, going from bowing on the D string to the A string or whatever, and that can be a little bit awkward. So you want to try and think about those kind of things. And this is where, by and largely, the rule being, make your notes in your harmony parts move by stepwise as much as possible. And if they can't move by stepwise, then try and keep it to simple intervals like thirds, fourths, and fifths, or chromatic passing notes. So try and move either stepwise by diatonic steps, or by chromatic steps, or by simple intervals, thirds, fourths, and fifths. And those kind of things, once you start getting them under your fingers and start getting them into your mind of how those things sound, they will become second nature. So a lot of this is all to do with practice. And, think about those things and think about how they sound and try and get the sound into your brain. Because once you start not just hearing the sound, but thinking about how those things sound, then you can start writing a horn section part or some backing vocal parts without even touching a piano or a guitar, because you know how it sounds, or you know how it looks on notation. You know how the stepwise motion goes. It's going from a line to a space to a line, or, a ledger line to a space below that ledger line to a regular line to a space, or something like that, is how it would look in notation. So that's a really good question, Rich. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. Jonah says, I thought you were going to break into November Rain by Guns N' Roses there for a minute. You know what? That's another very, very fine example of smooth voice leading in the chord changes. Yeah, that's another good example. Billy Morgan says, free Studio One goodies from Rich and buy him a coffee. Yes, go to s1box.com. Please do that. Please go to s1box.com and check out Rich's sound sets that he has made for Studio One, for Presence, for Mai Tai, for Mojito, and Impact. The four major instruments that are in Studio One. He has made a bunch of sound sets for those instruments in a variety of different styles for a variety of different settings, including kind of dramatic stuff, sci-fi kind of stuff. Well worth checking out. And you know what? It's all free. You can download that stuff at no cost to yourself. But whilst that's great that you can just get the stuff for free, and that's great, and I know that Rich wants you to be able to access it all for free, he has got a link to buying him a coffee. And I recommend that when you pick up one of his sound set packs, that you click that link to buy him a coffee and throw a few dollars or a few pounds or a few krona or a few euros or a few yen his way, or whatever your currency is. I definitely recommend you do that, because it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to make those sound sets. And I know for Rich, he considers it a service to the community, and he considers it a labor of love, and all of that. But still, please do be kind to Rich in that respect. All right, do we have any further questions? We have had a small crowd tonight. It's only been like 12 or 13 people, which is a wee bit of a shame, but it is what it is. You know, we're heading into the summertime, and, you know, people are starting to think about heading off on summer vacations and things like that, so that's totally understandable. I also need to talk to you guys about next week. Because next week there will be no Wednesday show because I will be down in England for a couple of days. Wednesday through Friday, I am at a corporate event. So that's where I will be. So there will be no Wednesday show. Okay, next week. So we'll have a Sunday show this week on the 16th, but on the 19th, no show. I will be unavailable. And then on Sunday the 23rd, we will still have a Sunday Night Live show. And then from then on, for pretty much most of the rest of the year, we should have shows uninterrupted from that point. So that is next week. So no Songwriting Simplified next week. It will be the week after. So you'll get 2 back-to-back Sunday Night Lives, and you'll get a free Wednesday night for an hour. Anyway, you'll get like that this hour on a Wednesday back, which is always going to be a good thing. All right, so I don't think we have any further questions. I'm not seeing any emailed questions. I'm just checking to see if I have any email questions, and I'm not seeing any. So we don't. Rich says, I'll be adding a 909 sound set soon. Awesome. For all you guys that want really, really great sounding 909s, you will be able to get them from s1box.com. Go and get them. I'm also going to give another shout out, actually. I'm going to give a shout out to my good friend Jonah. And his YouTube channel is called Team Studio One. And he is just getting started, kind of. And he is a really great guy. He is one of the Personas forum moderators, and he is one of the administrators of the Persona Studio One group. He's a really very, very knowledgeable guy, and he is developing some very, very cool tutorial videos over there. So if you want to get some good Studio One content other than what I offer and what Rich offers, go and subscribe to Team Studio One right now, because I'm wrapping up this show now. So as soon as this show is done, go and smack the the subscribe button on Team Studio One's channel. That's my good friend Jonah. He would appreciate that, I'm sure, and I would appreciate it if you support him as well. And Rich has very helpfully provided a link to his channel, which is awesome. So after this show, there will be an after show Zoom until the Studio One meetup. So if you want to go hang out for an additional hour with Billy Morgan, he is going to launch his Zoom. In fact, I believe he's already launched his Zoom. So you can go and head over there. Dave Barslow said, this was a great show. I learned what the top, the middle, and the bottom means on the keys. Yes, it's the different parts of the chord. Yeah. Subscribe to Team. There you go. Just Bob has subscribed to Team Studio One. Awesome. All right, folks, we will wrap the show up there. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for the cool chat and the good couple of questions there. This was fun, and it was fun to kind of delve into a little bit of Steely Dan backing vocal harmonies, and you'll hear those kind of harmonies pop up over and over again in Steely Dan songs and in the Eagles songs as well, because actually, harmonically, the Eagles and Steely Dan, they share some of the same harmonic palette. Not entirely the same. I would say Donald and Walter's harmonic palette is a bit more sophisticated than Don Henley's in the Eagles, but still pretty good. Still pretty close in a lot of respects. Certainly when it comes to backing vocals, there's a lot of similarities. Mike Johnson has subbed as well, and he says, I think it was number 100 for Team Studio One, which is awesome. I can remember it took me ages to get from 0 to 100, and then after 100, it started to snowball after that. It just takes a wee while getting that snowball moving, but once it's moving and it's on its way, it doesn't take too terribly long before suddenly you're up to 1,000 subscribers. So there you go. That's 2 people to go and visit. s1box.com, sound sets, buy Richard coffee, subscribe to Team Studio One. Please do it. For me, as much as anybody else. For those guys, as well as for me. I'd appreciate it. All right, guys. I will see you all on Sunday for Sunday Night Live, where we will be talking Studio One and Studio One features and Studio One questions. So if you have Studio One questions, you can get them in the chat just like tonight, but you can also email me as well. Like I said, go to johnnylipshamstudios.co.uk. It's at the bottom down there. Go there and hit the Contact Us button, fill out the contact form. If you've got like a much more detailed thing that you want me to explore, or a subject within Studio One that you want me to look at, or if you have a specific question that requires a little bit more than just the chat to go into detail of, email me. Put the subject as Sunday Night Live, and I will answer that question at the top of the show. Okay? Email questions get priority. Chat questions secondary. Until then, folks, I will see you on Sunday. Have a good rest of your evening and have a great rest of your week. See you Sunday, folks. Good night.